Tonight, I want to tell you a story about a city that could not stop bleeding. It is a beautiful city in the way that certain old and terrible things are beautiful. Tall gray houses and iron railings and lamps burning low in the fog and cobbled streets that wind up and up toward a great cathedral, and over all of it, a moon. The city is called Yharnam, and it is famous, once across the whole world, for a single thing. It can heal you. Whatever is wrong with you, however far gone you are, the city has a cure, and the cure is blood. It is a long story, and a dark one, and it is told the way this city tells everything, in whispers, on scraps, in the words carved under things, and every piece of it stands on its own. So if you drift off in one street and wake in another, you have lost nothing. The city will still be here. It does not sleep. Let me take you in then. Slowly, under the lamps, into the fog before the hunt begins. To understand the city, you have to start much higher than the city, out past it, above it, in the cold dark between the stars. Because there are things out there. The story calls them the Great Ones, and it calls them gods, and they are not gods in any way you would recognize. They are vast and old, and they exist across more than one plane of the world at once, so that you can never quite see the whole of one, only the part of it that has reached down into ours. They did not make the world. They are only, somehow, in it the way a hand is in a glove, and for most of history no one on the ground knew they were there at all. And then some people found out. That is really the whole of the tragedy, in one sentence. Some scholars, in a college by a lake, learned that the Great Ones were real, and became obsessed with knowing more, and the knowing is called, in the story, the Eldritch Truth, and it has a property. It breaks the mind of anyone who delves too deeply. Not all at once. Slowly. A little more knowledge, a little less sanity, until the two trade places entirely. And the people of this story delve, all of them, for the whole of it, because the thing they are reaching for is so beautiful and so close that they cannot make themselves stop. There is one more thing to know about the Great Ones before we go down to the city, and it is the saddest thing in the whole story, and everything else grows out of it. Every Great One has lost a child. Each of them, somewhere, in some way, had a child, and lost it, and each of them aches, forever, for another. That is what they want. Not worship, not really, and not destruction. A surrogate. Something small to hold. And the whole horror that is about to unfold in the streets of Yharnam is, at bottom, a story about enormous, lonely, grieving things reaching down out of the dark toward mortal wombs, hoping, this time, to keep the child. Hold that. It makes the monsters harder to hate. It is meant to. By a still lake, beyond a forbidden wood, past a forbidden grave, there is a college. It is old, older than the church, older than the hunt, older than almost everything in this story, and it is called Byrgenwerth. Its scholars studied the cosmos and the old buried places under the earth, and the nature of those great things above, and for a long time it was simply that. A quiet school by the water, full of clever, curious people, reading late into the night. The lake is very still. The building leans. In the end, only one old man is left in it, but we are a long way from the end. The scholars of Byrgenwerth made a discovery under the city that changed everything. Beneath Yharnam, deep down, there is a labyrinth, an enormous buried ruin left by a lost people called the Pthumerians, older than memory, and the scholars sent explorers down into it, generation after generation, to bring up its secrets. They called the explorers tomb prospectors. Many of them went mad in the dark. Few of them came back. But what they brought up, when they came back, was worth more to Byrgenwerth than any number of mines. Two things mostly. Proof that the Great Ones were real, and blood. Not ordinary blood. The scholars called it the old blood, and it had come from the deep places, from something down there, and it could do things blood should not be able to do. It could heal almost any wound. It could cure almost any sickness. And the scholars came to believe it could do more than heal. It could change a person, raise them, evolve them closer to the great things above. That is what they found under the city. A miracle and a poison in the same red cup, and the whole of the rest of the story is just the argument carried out with knives about which of those two things it really was. Rest here by the lake for a moment before the argument starts. The water is calm. Nobody has decided anything yet. The provost of Byrgenwerth, the head of the whole college, was a man named Master Willem, and Master Willem was afraid. From the very start, from the moment the old blood came up out of the dark, he was afraid of it, and he never stopped being afraid, and he said so, over and over, in words that echo through the entire game like a warning nobody heeded. "We are born of the blood," he said, "made men by the blood, undone by the blood. Our eyes are yet to open. Fear the old blood." He was not against reaching for the Great Ones. He wanted that as much as anyone, but he believed there was a right way to reach and a wrong one, and that the blood was the wrong one. The right way, he thought, was through the mind. Through knowledge and study and a kind of inner sight he called insight, earned slowly, honestly, at a desk, by candlelight. "We are thinking on the basest of planes," he used to say. "What we need are more eyes." He meant it almost literally. He believed that if a person could only grow enough eyes, enough ways of perceiving, they could see the truth of the cosmos without being destroyed by it. It is a mad idea. He was, by the end, a mad old man. But he was afraid of exactly the right thing, and that is more than anyone else in this story can say. When the player finally reaches him, an entire age later, Willem is alone in the ruined college by the water, in a wheelchair, saying almost nothing. He points at the lake. There is a pale fungus growing out of the back of his skull, which is what a lifetime of reaching for the truth did to him. He got his eyes, in a way. He is not happy about it. Leave him there for now, by the still water, pointing at something in the lake that we will get to. He tried to warn them. Nobody listened. That is the last thing that ever happened to Master Willem that he could control. One of Willem's own students disagreed with him, and that disagreement is the crack that the whole city falls through. His name was Laurence, and he looked at the old blood and did not see a poison. He saw a gift. He saw a thing that could heal the sick and comfort the dying and lift the suffering of ordinary people, right now, tonight, and he could not understand why his teacher wanted to keep such a miracle locked in a college by a lake, studied and feared and never shared. To Laurence, that was not caution. It was cruelty. So the two of them fell out, master and student, and before Laurence left the college for good to go down into the city and do the thing Willem had begged him not to do, Willem gave him one last piece of advice, one last adage between teacher and pupil, and it is one of the most quietly devastating lines in the whole story because of what it costs, later, to have ignored it. "Fear the old blood," Willem said. "By the gods, fear it, Laurence." And Laurence promised he would, and he did not. And the story tells us plainly that he was punished for breaking that promise. The man who broke it became, in time, the first of the beasts. But that is later, and it is terrible, and I will tell it to you gently when we come to it. For now, hold the two of them, the last time they were only two men in a college and not the founders of a catastrophe. The old teacher, afraid, holding the blood back. The young student, full of pity for the sick, wanting to give it away. Both of them right. Both of them wrong. That is how these things always start. Not with a villain. With two good people who cannot agree about a cup of blood and a lake between them going quietly dark. Laurence went down into Yharnam with a group of like-minded scholars, and there they founded a church. The Healing Church, they called it, and its purpose was simple and at first almost kind: to take the old blood and give it to the people. They called the practice blood ministration, and it was part transfusion and part the old idea of bleeding a patient to health, and it worked. It really worked. That is the thing you have to hold on to under everything that comes after. The blood healed people, the lame walked, the dying rose, and word of it went out across the whole world, and the sick and the desperate came to Yharnam from everywhere, because Yharnam was the one place on earth where you could be made whole. The Church's own prayer tells you where it was already going, if you listen. Our thirst for blood satiates us, it goes, soothes our fears. Seek the old blood, but beware the frailty of men. Beware the frailty of men. They knew, even in the prayer, even at the beginning, that there was a catch, and the catch was people. Because the blood did not only heal, it felt good. It felt better than good. Everyone who took it, even the ones who were cured completely, found they could not stop wanting more of it, and quietly, house by house, street by street, the whole city of Yharnam became addicted to the very thing that was saving it. And there was one more thing which the Church waved away. Every patient who took the special blood had a vision in the moment of a beast, a great bloody wolfish thing crawling toward them out of the dark. And the ministers would smile and say, "It is nothing, a mere bad dream," and send them home. But it was not a private dream. The same beast is carved into the Church's own altars, where the same ritual is performed, which means it happened to everyone, every time, the same vision, the same crawling beast, and the Church knew, and called it a bad dream, and poured the next cup. Rest there, in the cathedral, in the candlelight, with the whole city lining up for the cure. Nobody has turned yet. But the beast is already in the room. It has been in the room the whole time. The bad dream came true. That is the plainest way to say it. The blood that healed the city began, over years, to change the people who had taken too much of it, and the change was not gentle. They grew fur and claws, and their bodies bent into something huge and wrong, and their minds went out like lamps, and they became beasts. Not people who acted like beasts. Beasts. Snarling, blood-hungry things, wearing the last rags of who they used to be, and there were more of them every night, and the thing that had made Yharnam the envy of the world was quietly turning the world's envy into a slaughterhouse. The Church knew whose fault it was. Of course it knew. It was their blood, their gift, their miracle doing this. But a Church that has built its whole power on a cure cannot very well announce that the cure is the disease, and so it did the thing that institutions do. It lied. It blamed outsiders. It told the people of Yharnam that the plague had been carried in from elsewhere, by travelers, by foreigners, by the sick who came seeking help, and the people believed it, because it is easier to believe than the truth, and so on top of everything else, the city became cruel to strangers, and a traveler alone, in Yharnam at night, learned to be afraid of more than the beasts. And the first of the beasts, the very first, was the man who had started it all. Laurence. The student who could not fear the blood the way his teacher begged him to. He took too much of his own miracle, and it took him, and he became the thing the story calls the cleric beast, a towering, antlered horror that the hunters would one day fight on a moonlit bridge without ever knowing they were fighting the founder of their own church. That is the punishment the story promised. The man who gave the city the blood became the first monster the blood made. Rest on that, heavy as it is. He wanted to help. He truly did. It is the ones who want to help you should watch most closely in this city. They are the ones with the blood. The Church did not stay one thing. As it grew rich and powerful, and as the scholars inside it kept reaching, always reaching, for the truth of the Great Ones, it split, quietly, into two secret inner circles, and the two of them hated each other, and between them they did most of the specific, deliberate horrors in this story, the ones that are nobody's accident. The first was the choir. The choir were the Church's elite, its most refined and its most ambitious, and they had done something extraordinary. They had made contact. Using an old holy chalice, they had reached a great one directly, a being they called the Left Behind One, Ebrietas, and from her they drank down cosmic knowledge, and they came to believe that the future of humanity was not in the blood at all, but above, in the stars, in evolution, in growing new eyes and new minds. One of their notes reads like a prayer and a question at once. Here we stand, it says, feet planted in the earth, but might the cosmos be very near us, only just above our heads? They were dreamers, the choir. Dreamers who ran, in secret, an orphanage, and ground the orphans up, over generations, into a think tank, hunting for a child who could open its eyes on the inside. The dreamers are always the worst. Remember that. The other circle was the school of Mensis, and if the choir wanted to reach the cosmos by thinking, Mensis wanted to reach it by force. They based themselves in a hidden village called Yahar'gul, and they were willing to do the thing the choir would not quite do, which was to take ordinary people off the streets, out of their beds, and use them, kidnap them, harvest them, feed them into the ritual like fuel. The two circles spied on each other and stole from each other and grew, in parallel, more and more certain that they, and only they, knew the way up to the gods. And one of them, in the end, would succeed just enough to doom itself completely. But that is the middle of the night, and we are still, only just, in the evening. Rest here. The church is vast and rich and rotten, and it does not yet know that the reaching is about to reach back. Someone had to fight the beasts. That is where the hunters come from, and it is, like everything in this city, a little bit sordid underneath. When ordinary people could not afford the blood healing, the church offered them another kind of contract. You could not pay? Then you could hunt. Sign here, take up a blade, and go out into the night on the church's behalf and put down the beasts the church's own blood had made. It was a payment plan, dressed as a calling. And the strange thing, the sad and true thing, is that it worked, and that the hunters became, for all the ugliness of how they were made, genuinely brave, genuinely needed, the one thing standing between the sleeping city and the things in its streets. The first of them was a man named Ludwig. Ludwig, the first church hunter, who took the frightened, untrained people the church handed him and forged them into something real, a disciplined front against the scourge, and who is remembered by those who admired him as training his hunters like honorable soldiers of old. He fought with a strange great sword he had found himself, a blade he believed was inhabited by tiny beings of light, and he looked to it, he said, for guidance. There is a line of his, from much later and much worse, that I will give you now because it belongs to who he was at his best. "Ah, you were at my side all along," he says to the blade. "My true mentor, my guiding moonlight. Hold that." A frightened man in a dark city holding a sword up to the moon and calling its light his teacher. He deserved better than what happened to him. Almost everyone in this story did. And so, for a while, there was a kind of balance. The blood healed, and the blood cursed, and the beasts rose, and the hunters cut them down, and the city went on, night after moonlit night, bleeding and healing and hunting, sure that it had the whole terrible business under control. It did not. Nobody in Yharnam ever had it under control. But on a quiet night, before the worst of it, you could almost believe they did. Rest there. The lamps are lit. The hunters are out. The city thinks it is winning. Let it think so a little longer. The dawn it is waiting for is a very long way off. There is a hunter older than Ludwig, older than the church's whole hunting order, and he is the one the story calls the first hunter. His name is Gehrman. Like Laurence, like the woman we will come to, he trained at Byrgenwerth in the days when it was only a school by a lake, and he became something the world had not seen before, a man who hunted beasts, and he was very, very good at it, and it cost him everything a person can be made to pay. Because Gehrman did not stay only a hunter. At some point, in a way the story never fully explains, he became bound to one of the great things above. not one of the famous ones. A quiet one, a nameless one, that rules a place we will get to, and it took Gehrman the way the Great Ones take people, as a kind of surrogate child, a thing to keep. Most who tell this story believe it was grief that opened the door, that Gehrman lost someone he loved beyond bearing, and that the great thing came to him in that grief and offered him a dream where the loss need never be final, and that he said yes, because who among us would not? But the story does not confirm it. It only leaves the door open, and Gehrman on the other side of it, and lets you wonder what he traded and why. What Gehrman built, with the great thing's help, is the strange, still heart of this whole story, and it is called the Hunter's Dream. Rest there tonight, more than anywhere. It is a small, quiet clearing, always at dusk, built around a single old workshop with a garden of pale flowers and a stump lined with little white messenger figures that reach up out of the ground, and a row of gravestones and a great tree and a house with the lamps lit. It is not a real place. It is a dream shared between Gehrman and the great thing that keeps him, shaped from Gehrman's own memory of the real workshop he once worked in, far away and long ago. And it was made at the start for a good reason, so that there would always be hunters, so that when one fell, another could rise here in the quiet by the flowers and take up the blade and go back out. A safe place at the center of an unsafe world. Hold that. We come back here between every horror. It is where you are allowed to rest. Gehrman was lonely in his dream. Of course he was. A man bound forever to a quiet clearing, unable to truly die, unable to truly leave, with only the beasts and the grief for company. So he made himself someone. Out of the pale materials of the workshop, he built a doll, life-sized, in the shape of a woman, to keep him company and to care for the hunters who would come after him, and he built her, tenderly, obsessively, in the image of the one he had lost. The same height, the same face, the same voice. He poured himself into recreating her, this woman he could not have, and when the doll was finished, when she stood there at last looking back at him with the lost one's face, he found he could not bear her, and grew cold and distant because she had everything of the lost one except the one thing that mattered, which was her. The doll is one of the gentlest presences in the whole dark story. She waits in the clearing by the flowers and helps the hunter grow stronger, and she speaks of Gehrman with a quiet tenderness he never quite gave back to her. "Did you speak with Gehrman?" she asks. "He was a hunter long, long ago, but now serves only to advise them. He is obscure, unseen in the dreaming world. Still, he stays here in this dream. Such is his purpose. She is not bitter. She does not seem able to be bitter. She was made without whatever it is that lets a person be bitter, and she keeps the clearing and tends the flowers and waits. And she wonders, out loud, once, whether her own love is real, and it is the single most quietly heartbreaking thing anyone says in this whole story. Hunters have told me about the church, she says, about the gods and their love. But do the gods love their creations? I am a doll created by you humans. Would you ever think to love me? And then, before you can answer, she answers for herself and forgives you, and it is worse than any monster. Of course I do love you. Isn't that how you've made me? Rest with the doll tonight in the clearing among the pale flowers under the dusk that never quite becomes night. She does not know if what she feels is real. She feels it anyway. That is braver than most of the hunters ever manage. Not every hunter's tool was a blade. There was a splinter group, a heretical branch of the workshop, who cared nothing for the traditional weapons and loved instead things that exploded, complicated mechanical things, cannons and kegs and fire. The powder kegs, they were called, and they had a motto that tells you everything about them. If a weapon ain't got kick, they said, it just ain't worth it. And when the beast plague finally overwhelmed a whole district of the city, a valley of old houses called Old Yharnam, it was the powder kegs who were sent in, and it was the powder kegs who made the terrible decision that the rest of the church would rather not have made out loud. They fought for Old Yharnam, and they lost. Too many beasts, and too many of their own friends turning into beasts in front of them, mid-fight, in the smoke. And when there was no other choice left, they burned it. The whole district. Set it all alight, houses and streets and beasts, and surely people not yet fully gone, and let it burn to cinders under the low red moon to stop the plague from spreading past it. And the church, which had sent them to do exactly this, denounced them as heretics afterward because the powder kegs had committed the further sin of feeling something about it, of wanting, at the end, to protect the beasts rather than simply erase them. Among the survivors was a hunter named Jura, and Old Yharnam broke something in him. He had watched too many friends become monsters, and then burned the monsters that had been his friends, and afterward he could not do it anymore. He renounced the hunt entirely. He and a few others went back to the burned district, and instead of clearing out the beasts that remained, he climbed to a rooftop with a great mounted gun and stood guard over them to keep other hunters out, and he posted a sign at the edge of the ruin. "This town is long abandoned," it says. "Hunters not wanted here." He is not mad. He is the sanest man in the city. All beasts were once men, he will tell you, if you let him. Where is the profit in their murder? Rest with Jura on his rooftop over the burned quiet town, guarding the monsters nobody else will spare. He kept faith with the dead. In this city, that is nearly a miracle. A place chapter because the geography of this city is half its story. At the heart of Yharnam is the Cathedral Ward, the church's own district, the seat of all its power, and it is enormous and gray and holy, and on the night of the hunt, sealed. When the beasts come out, the church closes its gates, and the great cathedral rises over everything, and inside it the vicar prays, and the church giants keep their silent watch, and ordinary people are locked outside with the beasts, to be hunted or to hunt. There is a small safe place tucked inside the ward, a chapel, Oedon Chapel, with a lamp lit and a keeper at the door, and frightened people gather there through the long night, the ones who are still people, huddled out of the streets, and part of the quiet human tragedy of this story is watching who makes it to the chapel and who does not, and what happens to them even after they do. We will come back to the people in the chapel. They have small, terrible stories, most of them, and I will tell you a few before the night is over. And at the very heart of the ward is the grand cathedral, where the vicar of the whole church kneels in prayer, and where, on an altar, there is a beast's skull, and if you look closely at that skull, the whole story flickers for a moment, because it triggers a vision, a memory, of two men arguing long ago, a teacher and his student, about a cup of blood. It is Lawrence's skull. The founder of the church, the first of the beasts, ends up as a relic on the altar of the thing he built, and his own successors kneel and pray beside his skull without knowing whose it is. Rest in the cathedral, in the dark, among the giants and the candles. It is the most powerful building in the city. It is also a tomb, and the man in the tomb started everything, and nobody left alive remembers his face. Out past the edges of the respectable city are the places the church would rather you did not look. There is a district called Hemwick Lane, and it is built entirely around death, around the handling of the dead, houses shaped like crematoriums and guillotines, and crosses raised so that the crows can pick the corpses clean before anyone has to touch them. It is where the bodies go, and where, quietly, the organs of the dead are harvested for the church's darker rituals, so that even the city's death is put to work. A witch lives out there in the charnel lane, gathering eyes. It is not a warm place, but it is honest, in its way, about what the city is, which is more than the cathedral ever is. And beyond Hemwick, across a bridge that was later destroyed on purpose, there is a castle, locked forever in snow and ice, and it is called Cainhurst, and its story is one of the oldest wounds in the city. The nobles of Cainhurst, the Vilebloods, had got hold of the old blood too, through a scholar who defected from Byrgenwerth and shared it with them, and they had used it their own way to become something beautiful and cold, and the church decided forbidden. Fiends. And so the church made war on them. It sent its executioners, and they went up to that frozen castle, and they killed almost everyone in it, nobles and servants alike, and then they tore down the road behind them so thoroughly that in time the world forgot the castle was even there. That is the kind of thing this church does, under the healing, under the prayers. It brands a rival forbidden, and it sends men with blades up a mountain in the snow, and it erases the road afterward so that nobody can go and see what it did. There is a queen still up there in the ice, the last of the Vilebloods, waiting in an empty throne room for a war that ended long ago. Rest in the snow at Cainhurst in the cold, clean quiet. It is a beautiful ruin. Almost everything beautiful in this story is a ruin, and almost every ruin has a church behind it, holding a blade, wiping the blood off on its robes. Between the city and the old college by the lake, there is a forest, and the church has forbidden it, and there is a password to pass its gate, and the password, of all the things it could be, is Willem's own warning. Fear the old blood. You say the old man's fear aloud to get through the gate to the place his fear was about. The story does that sort of thing constantly, tucks its heart into a detail you might walk right past, and I keep stopping to point them out, because they are the reason this grim city is loved the way it is. The woods are deep and green and wrong. There is a village in them, of people who were once cast out of Yharnam for one reason or another, exiles, and the exiles are not doing well because the woods are full of enormous venomous snakes that have taken the villagers as hosts so that a body will unknot itself into a nest of serpents when you least expect it. It is a horrible place. It is also, in its horror, a kind of mirror. This is where the city sends the people it does not want, and this is what becomes of them, out past the gate, in the green dark, forgotten. The church locked the door and called the woods forbidden, and the people it locked out became monsters, and then the church could point at the monsters as proof the woods were dangerous. It is the same trick everywhere, all the way down. And at the far end of the woods, past all the snakes and the poison and the lost village, the trees thin and the ground rises, and there is the lake and the leaning old college and the still water and the mad old man in his chair pointing at something under the surface. Byrgenwerth. You come to it the long way through everything the college's own discovery set loose, which is exactly the right way to arrive. Rest in the woods a moment before the college, in the green and the quiet, with the snakes asleep and the poison settled. It is a forbidden place. Most of the true things in this city are. I want to introduce you properly, before the night begins, to the Great One the choir found, because she is not what you would expect a cosmic horror to be, and she matters to everything. Her name is Ebrietas, daughter of the cosmos, and the story calls her the left-behind Great One, which is a phrase so sad it hardly needs a chapter around it. Left behind. By the others, by her own kind, when they withdrew, or ascended, or did whatever the Great Ones do, she was the one who stayed, down here, alone, and the choir found her with their holy chalice, and drank her knowledge, and, most people believe, took from her the very old blood the whole church was built on. And here's the thing about Ebrietas. She is found, deep beneath the cathedral, in a hidden cavern the church calls the Altar of Despair, and she is not rampaging. She is mourning. She kneels beside the corpse of another creature, grieving it, or perhaps simply asleep, and she does not attack anyone who comes near. She only turns violent if she is struck first. The wiki, which has read every line of this game 100 times, says she seems to be the one Great One who actually wanted to live alongside humanity, to coexist, and that the humans repaid her by draining her for her blood and hiding her in a cavern named for despair. Hold her before we go down into the night, because she is the key to the whole moral shape of this story. The monsters are not the monsters. The Great Ones are lonely and grieving, and, at least one of them, gentle, kneeling in the dark beside their dead. The monsters are us. The church that drained her. The scholars who cracked open the village. The hunters, drunk on blood, cutting down anything that moves. When the horror comes tonight, and it is coming, remember the shape of Ebritas, in the dark, mourning, harmless, until struck. That is what we did our reaching toward. That is what we called a demon and put in a cavern named Despair. Rest on her. Then come down into the city. The moon is rising, and it is the wrong color, and the night is about to begin. Before the night, one last look down into the deep at where all of this came from, because the buried labyrinth under the city is not just a source of blood, it is a whole lost world, and it deserves its moment. Beneath Yharnam, under the streets and the church and the college, there is the labyrinth of the Pithumerians, an ancient people, gone now, who knew the Great Ones long before Byrgenwerth scholars ever lit a candle. Their tombs go down and down, chamber after chamber, and Byrgenwerth sent its prospectors into them for generations, and the prospectors brought up the blood and the proof, and one at a time, their own broken minds. Deep in the labyrinth, in one of its lowest branches, there is a queen. Yharnam, she is called, the Pthumerian queen, and the city took its name from her, though almost no one in the city knows it. She sits in the dark, bound and pregnant, and she has been there longer than the city above has existed, guarding the last secrets of her vanished people. She matters tonight, at the very end of the hunt, in a way I will come to. For now she is only a shape in the deep, a queen of a dead nation, with child, waiting, and the whole living city is built on top of her without ever having learned her name. That is the world then, all of it, before the one long night this story actually shows you. Great Ones grieving above. A queen waiting below. A college by a lake, and a church in the city, and a war over a cup of blood that healed everyone and cursed everyone and turned a whole people into monsters and a whole faith into a lie. Hunters in the streets. A doll in a dream. And over all of it, the moon, low and reddening. Rest here, on the edge of it. Everything I have told you so far is the past. It is settled. It cannot be changed. What comes next is the night, and the night is where you come in, small and outside and newly bled, waking up alone in a locked room in a city that is about to lose its mind. But that is the next breath. For this one, just rest. The past is done. The moon has not finished rising yet. This is the chapter the whole story turns on, and it is the worst thing anyone in it ever does, and I am going to tell it to you quietly, once, because it is the moral heart of Bloodborne, and because you should hear it before the night so that the night makes sense. Far from the city, on a lonely coast, there was a fishing village. A drowned little place around a great well, huts under a lighthouse, boats, nets, the ordinary life of ordinary people by the sea. And one day something washed up on their beach. A great one, dead. Her name was Kas, and her enormous body, part fish and part woman and part something with no name, lay on the sand, and the villagers, over time, changed. Kas, even dead, even only by being near, turned them slowly into things of scale and fin, and they came to worship her, the great dead mother, on their shore. Word of the strange village reached Byrgenwerth. And Master Willem, who wanted eyes, who always wanted eyes, sent scholars and hunters down the coast to investigate, and what happened when they arrived is the crime the whole rest of the story is punishment for. They did not study the village. They destroyed it. They killed the villagers and cracked open their skulls, hunting for the eyes inside, and then they went down to the beach, to the body of the dead god herself, and they desecrated it, cut into it, harvested it, for her blood and for the things living in her corpse. The story is only fully sure of two names among the hunters who did this. Gehrman, the first hunter, was there, and a woman named Maria, whom we will meet, was there. The others, the famous ones, Laurence, the mad scholars, the old teacher himself, most people place them at the hamlet too, but the story does not confirm it, and I will not either. And here is the part that curses them all. Cos, when she died, had been carrying a child. And the child died too, there on the beach, killed with its mother by the hunter's knives before it had ever properly lived. And Cos, whose body was dead, but whose mind somehow was not, looked out from wherever a dead god looks out from, and she laid a curse on the hunters who did this, and on any hunter ever after who let themselves grow drunk on blood the way these had grown drunk on power. The curse is this: you will not be allowed to wake. You will be pulled, when your time comes, out of the world into an endless sleepless hunt with no morning at the end of it, and you will hunt and never rest forever. Rest here before I tell you what that nightmare is. Hold the beach, the dead mother, the dead child, the knives. This is the sin. Everything the hunters suffer after this, they earned on that sand. Even the ones who only watched. The curse has a place, and the place is called the Hunter's Nightmare, and it is where the blood-drunk go. It looks at first like the city, like Cathedral Ward, like Central Yharnam, like the streets you know, but wrong, subtly, everywhere, the brick turned to smooth pale stone, the familiar corners leading somewhere they should not, every beast in it, a stronger and more desperate version of the one in the waking world. It is the city dreamed by something that hates the hunters, and it is full of them, all the hunters who ever fell to bloodlust, trapped, hunting each other and the beasts and nothing in a night with no dawn coded into it anywhere. Ludwig is there, the first church hunter, the good man who trained his people like honorable soldiers and looked to his blade's light for guidance. He took too much of the blood, in the end, like everyone, and became a great horsewolf horror, and he was pulled into the nightmare, and there, in blind endless rage, he slaughtered so many beasts and hunters that their blood formed a river, and he swims in it now, mad, a monster made of the best hunter the city ever had. When you fight him, near the end, something happens that I will save for later, when we reach the small stories, because it is one of the most beautiful moments in the whole game, and it deserves its own quiet. For now, only this. The first and finest of the hunters is drowning in a river of blood in a nightmare he was cursed into for a crime committed on a beach he may or may not have stood on. That is Bloodborne. Nobody gets out clean. The better you were, the worse it is. And the drowned village is still there, above the topmost layer of the nightmare, invisible from sky or ground, reachable only through a hidden clock tower door. The mutated villagers still pray to their dead mother on the sand. Their chants, if you could understand them, are grief, all of it, grief and a curse in the same breath. Mother is dead, they sing. Her baby taken. Curse the fiends, their children too, and their children, forever, true. Rest there, on the drowned coast, in the ruin of the worst thing the city ever did. The sea comes in and goes out. The lighthouse still turns. And somewhere on the sand, a curse that has outlived everyone who earned it goes on being kept by things that were once people over the body of a god who was only, ever, a mother. Sleep on that. It is heavy. It is meant to be. We go into the night now, and the night is lighter than this, because almost anything is. Now the night, at last, the one long night the story actually lets you live, and it begins with you. A hunter, an outsider, arriving in Yharnam for reasons the story keeps close, carrying a single note written in your own hand. Seek pale blood, it says, to transcend the hunt. You wrote that. You already knew the word before you ever came, though you may not remember writing it or where you heard it, and you have come to this city, of all the 6 cities in the world, following it. It begins in a clinic. A blood minister leans over you in a dim room and gives you the transfusion that begins the whole thing, the hunter's contract signed in your own veins, and when you murmur the word, pale blood, he knows it. Oh yes, he says. Paleblood. Well, you've come to the right place. And then the room swims, and you see the beast, the same bloody beast everyone sees, crawling toward you out of the dark, and you pass out of the waking world for the first of many times, and you wake in a strange, dusk-lit clearing full of pale flowers, where a doll and a wheelchair-bound old man wait to tell you what you have become. But that is getting ahead. First you wake in the clinic, alone, in the first-floor sick room, and the city outside is quiet, and it is the last quiet you will get. The doctor whose clinic it is, a woman named Iosefka, will not open her door. You can hear her through the glass, and she is not cruel, she is careful. "Are you out on the hunt?" she asks. "Then I'm very sorry, but I cannot open this door." "I am Iosefka." She is protecting her patients from infection, from the night, from you. She hopes, she says, to open her doors again once the hunt is over. Hold on to that voice, kind and frightened through the glass, because it is a lie, or rather, it becomes one in a way that is one of the small, quiet horrors we will come back to. For now, she is only a careful doctor keeping a door shut on a bad night. Rest in the sick room before you rise. The city is out there. The word is Paleblood. You wrote it yourself. Nobody, including you, remembers why. You step out into central Yharnam, and this is the city as the story first shows it, and it is magnificent and grim in equal measure. An upper district of narrow streets and high stone bridges, cut off from the rest of the city by a cliff, the houses shuttered, the lamps low, the fog moving, and somewhere, everywhere, the sound of things that used to be people. It is night, and it is the night, the one the whole city has been dreading, when the hunt goes wrong and does not stop. And on a rooftop, or by a lamp, you meet the first person who will tell you the truth, an old woman in a feathered cloak with a blade, and her name is Eileen the Crow, and she does not soften it. "Oh, a hunter, are you?" she says. "And an outsider? What a mess you've been caught up in. And tonight, of all nights, prepare yourself for the worst. There are no humans left. They're all flesh-hungry beasts now. She is a hunter of hunters, Eileen, an old tired one, and she has a code we will come to. For now, she is simply the first honest voice in the city, telling a newcomer exactly how bad it is, which is a kind of kindness in a place this full of lies. And she is right. There are, more or less, no humans left. The blood has taken most of them tonight under the low moon, and the ones who are not beasts yet are hiding, or hunting, or dying. There is a note in a dark house in central Yharnam that tells you, flatly, how the night began. When the hunt began, it says, the healing church left us, blocking the great bridge to Cathedral Ward as old Yharnam burned to the ground that moonlit night. The church locked its gates and left the people outside with the beasts. That is who they are. That is who they have always been. Rest in central Yharnam on a high bridge in the fog with the lamps burning and the old crow watching from the dark. You are outside, and it is the worst night in the city's history, and the only person who has told you the truth is a tired old woman who kills hunters for a living. Welcome to Yharnam. Try to stay yourself. Deeper into the church's district, in the grand cathedral itself, there is a woman at prayer, and her name is Vicar Amelia, and she is the head of the whole healing church now, the successor to Laurence, wearing his gold pendant, kneeling before the altar in the candlelight, saying the words of the faith. And you come upon her mid-prayer, and for a moment she is only a woman praying, the most powerful woman in the city, alone with her God in the dark, and the words she is saying are the church's own, the ones we heard at the beginning. Seek the old blood, she prays, but beware the frailty of men. Their wills are weak, minds young. And then, in the middle of the prayer, she changes. The blood takes her, right there, at the altar, in front of you, the vicar of the whole church, turning into a great pale, antlered beast between one word and the next, and you understand, watching it, that no one is safe, that the highest and holiest servant of the faith is no more protected from the faith's own poison than the poorest addict in the gutter. She was praying, "Beware the frailty of men," and the frailty took her mid-sentence. There is no cruelty in the game sharper than that timing. And when she is dead, when the beast that was the vicar lies still, you look at the altar she was praying to, and there is a skull on it, and touching it shows you the old vision again, the two men arguing about the blood, and the skull is Lawrence's, the founder's, and so the whole thing closes into a circle you can hold in one hand. The founder of the church became the first beast and ended as a skull on the altar. His successor prayed to that skull without knowing it and became a beast in front of it. The blood is not an accident that befalls the church. The blood is the church, all the way up, all the way down. Rest in the cathedral, with the vicar still, and the candles burning, and the founder's skull on the altar. The most powerful woman in the city just turned into a monster mid-prayer. Nobody is coming to save Yharnam. Yharnam is the thing that needs saving from. There is a knight in the city, early on, polite and warm and helpful, in heavy armor, and his name is Alfred, and he is delighted to meet a fellow hunter, and he will fight at your side, and he will tell you, cheerfully, about his life's work, and his life's work is murder. Alfred is an executioner, one of the church's holy order, sworn to wipe out the Vilebloods of Cainhurst, the frozen castle in the snow, and he has spent his whole life hunting them, and he is very happy about it, in the way that only a truly convinced person can be happy about a terrible thing. He is looking for the way to Cainhurst, and for the queen at the top of it, the last of the Vilebloods, Annalise, and his whole existence bends toward the moment he can finally end her line for good. And if you help him find her, and he does, the polite warm knight you have traveled beside stands over the bound immortal queen and crushes her, and then he laughs, and the laugh is not the laugh of the courteous man you knew. It is something colder, something that was under the courtesy the whole time, the joy of a fanatic completing his life's one purpose. And shortly after, his purpose fulfilled, with nothing left to live for, Alfred appears to end himself, sitting alone with the thing he has finally done. It is a small, sharp lesson, Alfred, and the city is full of them. The warmest person you meet is a zealot, and his warmth and his fanaticism are not opposites. They are the same thing, pointed at different targets, kind to you because you are a hunter, merciless to the Vilebloods because his faith told him to be, and underneath both the kindness and the mercilessness, nothing much of a person at all, just the purpose the church poured into him. Rest on Alfred before the laugh, when he was still just a friendly knight, glad of company on a bad night. That version of him was real too, for a while. The city takes the real versions and hollows them into purposes. It did it to Alfred. It does it to nearly everyone. It is doing it, slowly, all night to you. The word on your note was Paleblood, and the trail of it leads at last back to the lake, to Byrgenwerth, to the mad old teacher in his chair pointing at the water. And out across that still lake, on a great flat expanse, there is a thing waiting, huge and pale and alien, and it is called Rom, the vacuous spider, and Rom is not, whatever it looks like, a monster in the simple sense. Rom was once a scholar. The last one still loyal to Byrgenwerth, who made contact with the dead god Kos after the crime on the beach, and was rewarded, or cursed, with ascension, made into kin, made into this, and given a job. To hold a veil over the world. To keep ordinary human eyes from seeing the truth that is all around them, the great ones, the cosmos, the real shape of the night. Rom does not attack you first. Almost nothing in this story that matters attacks you first. But you have to kill Rom, to see, to go on, and when Rom dies, the veil dies with it, and the world changes in front of you. Ritual secret broken, the message reads. Seek the nightmare newborn, and you look up, and the sky is different. Heavy and red and drained-looking all at once, a sky the story calls the Paleblood Sky, hanging over the whole city where an ordinary night sky used to be. This may be what your note meant. Pale blood, the color of the exposed sky? Or it may not. The director himself has said there are 2 readings and refused to choose, and the other reading is stranger, and we will come to it. For now, only this. You killed the thing holding the veil, and the veil came down, and now you can see, and seeing is the beginning of the end of you. And the old man by the lake, Willem, who pointed you here, he wanted eyes. He wanted, his whole life, for humanity to be able to see this, the truth above the veil, and now here you are, seeing it, a hunter he never met, and it is killing your mind exactly the way he always knew it would. He was right about everything, and it did not save him or anyone. Rest by the lake, under the wrong red sky, with the veil gone and the old man silent in his chair. You can see the truth now. That was always the trap. The truth was never a thing you could survive knowing. Willem knew. He said, "Fear the old blood." Nobody listened, including you, and now the sky is the color of blood, and you are still walking toward the thing that made it. When Ram dies, the moon changes. It has been low and pale and reddening all through the night, and now, with the veil gone, it descends, and it fills with red, and the story calls it the blood moon, and it is the third and final turn of a cycle the whole city has been living inside without knowing it. Under the blood moon, everything that has been held back comes loose. The Great Ones draw close. The boundary between one world and the next goes thin. And a womb, the old note said, at the beginning will be blessed with child. And you can hear it once the blood moon rises. A baby crying. Everywhere. Across the whole waking city, an infant's cry, coming from nowhere and everywhere, and it does not stop, and its name is Mergo, and it is a Great One's child, and the crying is the sound of the thing the whole church, and both its mad inner circles, have been reaching for all this time, finally, almost, within reach. Most of the people still left in Yharnam lose the last of themselves when the blood moon rises. What was madness becomes transformation. What was a frightened person in a chapel becomes too often a beast. The moon pulls the truth up out of everyone, and for almost everyone, the truth is a monster. It is a strange, terrible, beautiful thing, the blood moon over Yharnam, and if you can hold it apart from the horror for a moment, it is worth holding because it is the most Bloodborne image there is. A red moon, enormous, low over a city of gray spires, and a baby crying somewhere in the dark, and the whole world gone thin and close and dreadful and holy all at once. Rest under it. The crying is far off. It is only a child wanting its mother, the way every great one and every hunter and every lost thing in this whole story only ever wanted the same simple, impossible thing. Someone to hold. Someone to hold them. Sleep under the red moon. The crying will not wake you. It is not for you. The crying leads to Yahar'gul, the unseen village, the hidden city where the school of Mensis did its work, and when you finally reach it, the work is over and everyone is dead. The population of Yahar'gul is petrified, corpses melded into the very walls, people turn to gray stone mid-scream, and it is one of the eeriest places in the whole game, a whole village fossilized in the instant of whatever the ritual did to it. Mensis reached for the child, up here, using the one method the choir would not stoop to, taking ordinary people off the streets and feeding them into the reaching, and the reaching, at last, reached back, and this is what was left. There are notes all through Yahar'gul, left by dying hunters and scholars who understood too late what was being done. The Mensis ritual must be stopped, one reads, beside its author's own corpse, lest we all become beasts. Madmen toil surreptitiously in rituals to beckon the moon, reads another. Uncover their secrets. Behold, reads a third, a Paleblood Sky. The whole village is a series of last words, scratched down by people who could see the catastrophe coming and could not stop it, and then were caught in it and turned to stone mid-warning. Because Mensis succeeded in the worst possible way, they got their audience with the child. They reached Mergo. And the reaching stillbirthed the collective minds of the entire school, killed them all in their reaching, all but one, and pulled them down into a nightmare of their own making, a vast dream castle they could never leave. The one survivor is a man named Micolash, and he is not really in the village at all anymore. His body is here, dead in the stone. But he himself is somewhere else, running through the endless halls of the nightmare his ambition built, and you have to go in there after him into the dream to end what he started. Rest in the fossilized village first. It is quiet, as only a place where everyone died at once is quiet. They knew. They wrote it down. It did not help. It so rarely helps in this city to have known. Deep in the ritual city of Yahar'gul, the school of Mensis built something, and it is the most wretched thing in the whole game, and it is worth a moment because of what it says about the reaching. The scholars of Mensis wanted to make a great one. Not to reach one, not to contact one, but to build one out of what they had, and what they had was people. Corpses. Bodies harvested from the streets and the charnel lanes, piled up and bound together and animated into a single towering thing of many faces and many limbs, a god assembled out of the dead, and the story calls it the One Reborn. It is a failure, of course. It is always a failure. You cannot build a god out of stolen corpses any more than you can reach one by cracking open a village, and the thing Mensis made is only a vast suffering wrongness, rung by bells, kept upright by ritual, a monument to the belief that if you only gather enough of the dead and want it badly enough, you can force the cosmos to hand you a miracle. The bell-ringing women who summon it stand in their towers and call it into being, and when you put it down, the bells go quiet, and the thing they built out of everyone's dead sons and daughters comes apart back into the corpses it was always made of. That is Mensis in one image, not evil for its own sake. Just certain, so certain that the truth was worth any price, that they were willing to build a god out of the bodies of the poor and call it progress. And it got them nothing, the way the reaching always gets nothing, except a nightmare they could not leave and a monster made of their neighbors. Rest after it, in the quiet where the bells have stopped. The One Reborn was a prayer in its way, a prayer made of corpses that no god answered, because it was never a prayer at all, only a theft dressed as one. The city is full of those. It called them all faith. The nightmare of Mensis is a castle inside a dream, all great bridges and hanging gardens and long stone halls, and a colossal ancient Great One watches over it from a distant tower, kept there by the school as a living relic, its gaze alone strong enough to drive mad anyone caught in its light. And running through the halls, always ahead of you, laughing, chanting, quoting his own ambition back at himself, is Micolash, host of the nightmare, the last of the school of Mensis, the man whose reaching brought them all here. He chants as he runs, and what he chants is a prayer to the dead god on the beach, the mother of the whole curse, and he does not seem to know or care that she is the source of everything wrong with him. "Ah, Kos," he cries through the halls, or some say Cosm, "do you hear our prayers?" He wanted to hear the gods. That was all he ever wanted, this ruined man, to make contact, to hear the cosmos answer, and he reached and reached until he tore a hole and fell through it, and now he runs through the hole forever, still asking, still praying, still certain the answer is just around the next corner. And when you finally catch him and end him, he says the truest and saddest thing anyone in the nightmare says. Now he says, "I'm waking up. I'll forget everything." Because his mind only exists in here, in the dream, and to end him in the dream is to send him back to a waking world where there is nothing left of him but a corpse in a stone village. He will wake and forget and find himself dead. That is what waking means for Micolash. Rest in the nightmare a moment after. The great eye watches from its tower. The halls go quiet. A man who wanted only to hear the gods lies still, having heard them finally and been unmade by the hearing. He got what he prayed for. In this city, that is the very worst thing that can happen to you, to be answered. At the deepest heart of the nightmare of Mensis is the child, Mergo, the infant Great One whose crying has filled the waking city since the blood moon rose, the thing the whole church reached for, the surrogate every grieving god has been aching toward since before the city was built. Most believe Mergo is the child of the Thumerian queen far below, and the formless Great One we have not quite met, and most believe Mergo was stillborn or died just after the ritual because the item that describes the reaching says so plainly. This cord granted Mensis audience with Mergo, it reads, but resulted in the stillbirth of their brains. A dead reaching for a dead child. And Mergo is not undefended. Standing over the child is one of the most beautiful and terrible figures in the whole game, Mergo's wet nurse, a towering thing of 6 arms and black wings and drifting robes, a shape like grief itself given a body, keeping watch over the infant in the dark. And you fight her over the crying child in the nightmare, and it is the fight that ends the night, or nearly, and when she falls, the crying stops, at last, across the whole waking city, the terrible endless infant cry finally silenced. And then something quiet happens that most players almost miss. The Pythamerean queen, Yharnam, the pregnant queen from the deep, is there, or her shape is, watching, and when the wet nurse falls and the child is freed or avenged, she bows to you. A queen of a dead nation bowing to a hunter in gratitude, most believe, for what you did for her child before she vanishes. That is the closest thing to thanks anyone offers you in this entire story. A silent bow from a dead queen over a dead baby in a nightmare, and then she is gone. Rest there in the sudden silence where the crying used to be. It is over, the reaching, the ritual, the whole mad grab for the child. It failed the way everything in this city fails. And a queen bowed to you in the dark, and you will never be sure exactly what for. Before the endings, I want to walk you past the Great Ones one more time as people, because by now you have met the city and the night, and you can hold them differently. Start with the amygdala, because they are everywhere. Great spidery clawed things, and there are statues of them all over the Cathedral Ward and Yahar'gul, so many statues that you realize these were among the most worshipped gods in the whole city, and there are living ones too, clinging invisibly to the tops of buildings, watching until your own insight grows high enough that you can suddenly see them, hanging there, having been there all along. There is a man who worships one of them out in a misty frontier nightmare, and his name is Patches, and he is a spider, sort of, and a swindler, and he feeds victims to his amygdala as offerings, and when you kill his god, he is not angry with you. That is the strangest thing. He is at peace with it. Think not of poor amygdala, he says. Upon that piteous bastard you bestowed salvation. He calls the death of his own god a salvation, a mercy, and there is something in that which is the whole game in a sentence. In Yharnam, to kill a god is not a triumph. It is a kindness. They are all so tired, the gods, so lonely, so bereaved, that ending them is the nicest thing anyone ever does for them. And Ebrietas, again, because we cannot leave her. The left-behind one, mourning in the cavern, named Despair, the gentle one, the one who wanted to live alongside us. She does not attack unless attacked. Neither does the orphan on the beach who stares up at the sky before it turns and fights. It is a small deliberate motif, the wiki says, these great terrors that face away from you, grieving, until you come close enough to make them defend themselves. The horror of Bloodborne is not that the gods are cruel. It is that they are sad, and we could not leave them alone, and so we made them fight. Rest on the grieving gods. There is a whole cosmos of them out there, above the red sky, each one aching for a child, and the bravest and cruelest thing the little hunter does, all night long, is put them out of their grief, one at a time. There is one great one you never see, not once. Not a glimpse. His name is Oedon, and he has no body, no shape, no form of any kind, and he exists in the story only as a voice and a presence and a single rune, and yet most who have studied this closely think he may be the most powerful of all of them, precisely because he has transcended even having a shape. He is a great one who is only a will, only a longing, and the longing is the same as all the others. He lost a child. He wants another. Every great one loses its child, the item text says, and then yearns for a surrogate, and Oedon, the formless great one, is no different. And here is the quiet, enormous thing about Oedon. Because the old blood is, in some way, his medium, the substance through which his formless presence moves in the world, the whole of Yharnam has been worshipping him the entire time without knowing it. Every blood ministration, every transfusion, every cup of the cure, every addict, in every gutter, all of it, unknowingly, an act of devotion to a god no one has ever seen. The safe chapel in the Cathedral Ward is called Oedon Chapel. The tomb where poor Viola is found is the tomb of Oedon. His name is on the quiet places, the resting places, and nobody who says it knows they are naming a god. That is the shape of the faith, in the end. A whole city on its knees, its whole life, to a formless grieving thing it cannot see and does not know it serves, reaching up toward it through blood, giving it, unknowingly, exactly what it wanted all along, which was a child. Mergo was, most believe, Oedon's child, with the queen in the deep. And the whole mad night, the ritual, the reaching, the blood moon, the crying, was the formless god almost, getting the one thing it has wanted since before the city was named. It failed. They all fail. But you can feel, under everything, how badly the sad, invisible thing wanted it. Rest on Oedon, the god of the resting places, whom everyone serves and no one sees. You have said his name tonight without knowing. Everyone in Yharnam has. It is the name on the door of every quiet room. And the last of them, the one that has been over the whole story since the beginning, the one that rules the hunter's dream, where you rest between horrors. The moon presence. It is never named on screen, except once, quietly, by the doll, who calls it tenderly, O Flora of the moon of the dream. Its origin is unknown. Its first contact with humanity was Laurence, the church's founder, who summoned it for reasons the story never gives, and it came, and it has been here ever since, hanging over the dream, pale and vast and silent, keeping Gehrman, keeping the hunters, keeping you. Nobody is sure what it wants. There is one note, unsigned, that says only, "Hunt the great ones, hunt the great ones," and from that single scrap, most people build the theory that the moon presence's whole project is the elimination of its own kind, that it uses the hunters, all of them, you included, as a blade against the other gods, that every great one you put out of its grief tonight, you put out of its grief on the moon presence's behalf. But the story does not confirm it. It never confirms anything about the moon presence. It is the deepest of the game's mysteries, and it is meant to stay one. Is it cruel? Is it kind? Is it using you, or keeping you safe, or both? The clearing it made, or let Gehrman make, is the only gentle place in the whole story, the flowers, the dusk, the doll, the rest. And it is also a trap, a beautiful loop you may never escape. Both things are true, and the story holds them both, and refuses to choose. Rest in the dream, under the moon presence tonight, without deciding what it is. It has kept you safe all night, between the horrors, in the quiet, among the flowers. It may also own you completely. That is the last thing to hold before the endings. The safest place in Yharnam is inside the grip of the thing you understand least. Sleep there anyway. There is nowhere safer, and there never was. When the crying stops, when the wet nurse falls, and Mergo is silenced, the dream changes. The workshop, the safe old house in the clearing, catches fire, quietly, in the dusk, and the doll comes to you with new words, and her words mean the night is finally ending. "Good hunter, you have come," she says. "Dawn will soon break." This night and this dream will end. Gehrman awaits you at the foot of the great tree. Go on, good hunter. And you walk, one last time, across the clearing you have rested in all night, past the flowers, past the gravestones of the hunters who came before, toward the great tree where the first hunter waits in his wheelchair to end things, one way or another. Gehrman is gentle about it. He has been here so long, bound to this dream, unable to die, unable to leave, and he knows exactly what you are and exactly what is being offered to you because it was offered to him once, and he took it, and look what it made of him. He offers you release, a clean death at his hand with the old blade, and a true waking out of the dream into the morning, the hunt over, yourself again, free. Farewell, my keen hunter, he says, if you accept. Fear the blood. It is the same warning the old teacher gave all those years ago at the beginning of everything. Fear the blood. It has come all this way, through every horror, to be the last thing the first hunter says to you before he sets you free. And you can accept, or you can refuse. That is the whole of the game's ending, one small choice at the foot of a tree in a burning dream, and everything the whole night has meant comes down to whether you kneel. Rest here, before you choose, in the last quiet of the clearing, with the workshop burning soft behind you, and the old hunter waiting with the blade across his knees, and the great tree overhead. He is not your enemy. He is trying, in the only way he knows, to give you the mercy no one ever gave him. What you do next, I will tell you 3 ways, because the story tells it 3 ways, and refuses, as it always refuses, to say which one is true. The first ending. You kneel. You accept Gehrman's offer and lay down your arms, and the old first hunter rises from his wheelchair, and with the burial blade he ends you cleanly, kindly, and you close your eyes in the burning dream. And you wake in the city, in what seems to be the true waking Cathedral Ward, as the sun comes up, real sun, ordinary and gold, and a distant bell tolls, and the night is over. The hunt is done. You survived it, more or less. You got out, you woke, and Yharnam has its dawn at last, and you are yourself, and free and alive in the morning light. And back in the dream, the doll kneels at a gravestone, one of the many in the clearing, and it is, most believe, yours, and she says a farewell that is one of the softest things in the whole game. Farewell, good hunter, she says. May you find your worth in the waking world. That is it. That is the whole of the gentlest ending. You go free into the morning, and a doll made from a dead woman's face kneels in a dream and wishes you well in a world she can never go to. She stays. You leave. She is glad for you. She is always only glad for you. It is called Yharnam Sunrise, this ending, and it is the closest thing the story has to a happy one, and even it is shadowed, because you gave up the dream and the truth and the great terrible knowledge to get it, and you will wake in a city that will not remember the night, and you will carry alone what you saw. But you will be alive in the sun yourself. In this story, that is very nearly a miracle. Rest on the sunrise. It is a real one. The bell is really tolling. Somewhere the doll is kneeling at your grave in a dream, glad you got out, and you will never know she did it, and that is all right. Some kindnesses are meant to go unwitnessed. Hers do. Every one of them. The second ending. You do not kneel. When Gehrman offers you release, you refuse it, and the old first hunter looks at you and understands and grieves a little and rises to fight you in earnest, because that is the rule of the dream, that to refuse the mercy is to have to defeat the one offering it. Dear, oh dear, he says as the fight begins. What was it? The hunt, the blood, or the horrible dream? Oh, it doesn't matter. Tonight, Gehrman joins the hunt. And you fight him, the first hunter, the man who built the clearing, and the doll, and everything gentle in the whole story, and you win because you are the one the story follows, and he falls, at last, released, finally allowed to die. And then the moon presence descends. The pale, vast, silent thing that has hung over the dream all night comes down, and it takes you the way it once took Gehrman, wraps you in its grip, and claims you, and you become the new keeper of the dream, the new first hunter, bound here now as he was bound, to advise the hunters who will come after, to wait in the clearing, to never truly leave. And sometime later, the doll is shown pushing you, in Gehrman's old wheelchair, around the workshop, tending you the way she tended him as the moon turns red again over the dream, and the whole endless hunt begins once more. It is called Honoring Wishes, and it is the loop closing, the story eating its own tail, you becoming the very thing you replaced, and it is sadder than the sunrise, and, in a way, more faithful, because you did not take the easy waking, you stayed, you took the old man's burden onto yourself, so that the hunters would have someone. Rest on it, the wheelchair, the doll pushing you gently around the clearing, the red moon coming up again. You did not escape. You became the keeper. Someone always has to be the keeper in the dream, or there are no hunters, and without hunters, the city has nothing between it and the beasts. You chose to be that. It is a kind of love, even if it looks like a trap. Most love in this story looks like a trap. That does not make it less than love. The third ending, and the strangest, and the one the second game seems to follow from. It begins exactly like the second. You refuse Gehrman, you fight him, you win, and the moon presence descends to claim you. But this time you have done something first, over the course of the night, without perhaps knowing why. You have consumed 3 of the third umbilical cords, the strange relics that grant an audience with the Great Ones, and because you carry them inside you, when the moon presence reaches for you, you do not submit. You resist. You refuse even the god. And the moon presence, denied, has to fight you itself, and you defeat it, the pale, vast thing that has ruled the dream since before you came, and with it dead, and the cords inside you, you do not die, and you do not wake. You change. You become one of them, a great one. Small and new, an infant god, the next stage of the very thing every scholar and every madman in the whole story reached for and died reaching for. The hunter, the little outsider who came following a word on a note, ascends past humanity entirely and is found, tiny and newborn, by the doll who lifts you and cradles you the way she was always, underneath, made to do, and holds the future of humanity in her artificial arms in the quiet of the burning dream. It is called Childhood's Beginning, and it is the ending where the reaching finally works, where a human becomes a god, not through the church's blood, or the choir's study, or Mensis's slaughter, but through one small hunter surviving one long night and refusing, at the very last, to kneel to anything, even a god. Rest on it. The doll cradling the newborn god you became in the dusk among the flowers. It is not a happy ending exactly. It is not a sad one. It is the door opening, at last, onto whatever comes after humanity, held in the arms of the gentlest thing in the whole story, who was made from a dead woman by a grieving man, and who wondered once whether her love was real, and who is now, whatever the answer, holding a god. That is where the night ends, if you refuse everything. In a doll's arms. Beginning again. Sleep on that. 3 endings. The story will not choose. Neither will I. They are all tonight true. Now the small stories, the human ones that run under the whole night, because they are the reason people love this grim city, and because they are gentler than the gods, and you have earned some gentleness by now. Start with Eileen the Crow, the old woman who told you the truth in central Yharnam. She is a hunter of hunters, which is a specific and merciful and terrible job. When a hunter goes blood drunk, when one of the people meant to protect the city turns and starts killing everything, someone has to put them down, and doing it is too grim a thing to leave to just anyone, and so it is left to Eileen. A hunter should hunt beasts, she says. Leave the hunting of hunters to me. She takes the worst duty in the city onto herself so that no ordinary hunter has to carry the weight of killing one of their own. And she is old and tired and near the end of it. If you follow her story through the night, you find her at last badly wounded outside the Grand Cathedral, having taken on one hunter too many, and she gives you her badge and her title and passes the terrible mercy of her work on to you, and then she is gone. Whether she dies there or simply walks off into the dark under her own power to finish it somewhere private, the story does not say, and I think that is deliberate and right. Some people should be allowed to leave without us watching. Rest on Eileen, the old crow, who did the hardest, kindest job in the city until she could not do it anymore and then handed it to a stranger and walked into the fog. She is not a god. She is not a monster. She is an old woman with a blade and a code, doing a necessary awful thing gently for as long as her body lets her and then trusting it to someone else. In a city of grand horrors and grieving gods, she is just a person, being decent at great cost in the dark. Those are the ones to hold. There are not many of them. She is one. One of the first beasts you fight, early in the night, in a graveyard, is a hunter named Father Gascoigne, and his is the small story that breaks people, because it is not about gods at all. It is about a family. Gascoigne was a hunter, once partnered with an older hunter named Hemwick, and he took a wife, a woman named Viola, and they had children, little girls, and for a while, in the middle of all this horror, there was an ordinary family in an ordinary house, a father who hunted at night and came home in the morning. But the blood takes hunters too, and it took Gascoigne, slowly, and as it took him, he began to forget. Forget the hunt, forget himself, and worst of all, forget his family, drift too far into the beast, and not find his way back. And Viola had a way to call him home. A little music box, a shared thing between them, that played a tune he knew, and when he strayed too long, she would play it, and the tune would reach through the fog in his head and remind him who he was and bring him back. On the night the story begins, she went out looking for him to bring him home one more time, and she forgot the music box. Left it on the table at home, and she is found, later, dead in the tomb of Oedon, and her two daughters are alone in the city on the worst night of its life. The story never says who killed Viola. Whether Gascoigne, lost in the beast, killed his own wife, or whether a mob of marauding hunters killed her, and that is the grief that finally broke him, the game leaves genuinely open, and I will leave it open too, because the not knowing is the point. What the story does give you is his death. When you put the beast that was Gascoigne down, at the end of the fight, his final scream, distorted through the monster's throat, sounds, most people agree, like the words "forgive me." To Viola maybe, to his daughters, to Henrik, to you. Rest on Gascoigne, and the music box on the table, and the tune that would have brought him home if she had only remembered it. That is the whole tragedy of this city in one object. A little music that would have been enough, left behind by mistake on the one night it mattered most. Through the night, if you are gentle, you can send frightened survivors to the safe chapel, Oedon Chapel, in the Cathedral Ward, and their small stories weave together there in ways that are sometimes sweet and more often terrible, and they are worth an unhurried chapter. There is a beggar found among corpses that look like a butchered family, apparently feeding on them, and if you raise your blade, he becomes a great beast, but if you do not, if you simply speak to him, he turns out to be only frightened and harmless, and asking, like everyone, where he might wait out the night in safety. It just goes to show, his own hood reads, the corner beggar is not always who he seems. In this city, the question is never quite whether someone is a monster. It is whether you will make them into one. There is a blood saint named Adela, a nun who offers her own blood freely to any hunter who frees her, though the church forbids it, and there is a woman named Ariana, and if you shelter them both in the same chapel, jealousy, or suspicion, or something the story leaves unnamed, moves in Adela, and she murders Ariana in the night, over blood, over faith, over who is allowed to give what to whom. And Ariana, if she lives instead, becomes pregnant under the blood moon and bears, in the tomb of Oedon, a Great One's child, a small crying celestial thing, and the story of that child is its own quiet horror that I will let stay quiet. That is the chapel. A handful of frightened people herded into one safe room on the worst night of the world, and even there, even in the one safe place, the horror finds a way in, through jealousy, through faith, through the blood, through the moon. You spend the night trying to save them, and you cannot save all of them, and some of them you save into worse things than the street would have been. Rest in the chapel anyway, with the lamp lit and the keeper at the door and the survivors huddled in the dark. Some of them make it to morning. Not many. But the lamp is lit, and for a few hours, for a few of them, it is enough. In Yharnam, a few hours of enough is more than most nights give. Two more hunters, and then the loop, and then good night. The first is Simon, met only in the nightmare, the herald, who serves as the guide and the conscience of that cursed place. He carries a bow, which no other hunter does, and he is thoughtful and sad, and he understands the nightmare better than anyone still able to speak, and it is Simon who finds the head of Ludwig, and gives the first hunter the eulogy he earned. Simon spends his last strength trying to reach the source of the nightmare, to end the curse at its root, and he does not make it, cut down by a church assassin before the end, and his final act is to ask you to finish what he could not. Put a stop to it, he asks. The nightmare. And then he is gone, and you go on, and you do. The other is Walter, master of the League, and his is a stranger, fiercer grief. He was a lawman once, from somewhere far away, who chased a beast all the way to Yharnam alongside his fellow officers, and when the beast killed the others, Walter alone survived, and in his rage and his grief he devoured the beast whole, ate it, and the eating opened his eyes to something he calls vermin, a foulness he now sees everywhere, and dedicates his whole remaining life to destroying. He founded a covenant, the League, hunters who work together, who watch each other's backs, who refuse to hunt alone, because Walter learned, the hardest way, what happens to the ones who are left alone with their dead. That is the League, and it is the closest thing this story has to a good institution, which tells you how low the bar is, and how much it means to clear it. Not the church, not the choir, not Mensis, none of the great powers that reached for the gods and made monsters. Just a grieving lawman who could not save his friends, deciding that no hunter under his banner would ever again go into the dark without someone beside them. Rest on Walter and Simon, the guide and the master, two men who lost almost everything and turned the loss, not into reaching, not into a grab at godhood, but into keeping other people company in the dark. That is the whole moral of the city, if it has one. The ones who reached for heaven made hell. The ones who stayed down here and kept each other company are the only ones the story lets you love without a wound. Remember the kind doctor behind the glass, Iosefka, who would not open her door because she was protecting her patients? That story has a knife in it, and here it is. There are two Iosefkas. The real one, the frightened, careful doctor, keeps her door shut all night out of genuine love for the people in her care and hopes, aloud, to open again once the hunt is over. And then there is the other one. An impostor, wearing Iosefka's face, using Iosefka's clinic, and every frightened survivor you send there, thinking you are sending them somewhere safe, is taken by the impostor and experimented on and turned into a twitching celestial thing. By the time you can finally get into the clinic, it is done. The survivors you sent are monsters. The impostor is there, wearing the kind doctor's face over whatever she has become. And the real Iosefka, the true one, the one who loved her patients and kept her door shut to save them, her fate, the story, never shows you at all. She simply drops out of the night, somewhere between the last time you heard her kind, frightened voice through the glass and the moment you walked into what her clinic had become. Gone. Unaccounted for. One more person the city swallowed without ceremony. It is a small, cruel piece of the story, the two Iosefkas, and it teaches you the thing the city keeps teaching, which is that you cannot save people by sending them somewhere, that the safe places are not safe, that kindness in Yharnam is a door someone else is always wearing a stolen face behind. Rest on the real Iosefka, though, not the impostor. The real one who kept her door shut all night out of love and hoped to open it again in the morning. She never got the morning, but she meant the love. In this city, you have to hold on to the ones who meant it, because the city does not hold on to them for you. It lets them fall through, quietly, between one scene and the next, and only the ones who are paying attention even notice they are gone. I promised you Ludwig's moment, and here it is, and it is the most beautiful thing in the whole game, so let it be the softest chapter. Ludwig, the first church hunter, the good man who trained his people like honorable soldiers and looked to his blade's light for guidance, fell to the blood like everyone and became a great horse-wolf horror and was cursed into the hunter's nightmare, where he made a river of blood in his blind rage and swims in it still. And you go into that nightmare in the last chapter of the city's story, and you fight him, this drowning monster, this ruin of the finest hunter Yharnam ever made. And halfway through the fight, something happens. If you have found and you show him an old holy blade, a moonlit sword, the beast stops. And for a moment, one single moment, Ludwig remembers himself. The horror falls away, and the man surfaces, and he recognizes the blade, the one whose light he called his guiding moonlight all those years ago, and he speaks clearly for the first and last time. "Ah," he says, "you are at my side all along. My true mentor, my guiding moonlight." And he asks this ruined thing with the last of his mind, whether the good hunters still hold the line, whether the church still protects the people, whether all his work meant anything. And you cannot answer him because you never speak, and he dies believing, choosing to believe, that it did. There is a man who finds Ludwig's head, after, a hunter named Simon, and what he says is the eulogy the first hunter earned. "A tragic figure," Simon says. But he will shame himself no longer. He died with his ideals untarnished. He was a true hero and earned that much at least. Rest on Ludwig, who drowned in blood for 100 years, and surfaced at the very end for one clear moment to see his own sword's light again and call it his teacher and die a man and not a monster. He earned that much. In this city, that much is nearly everything. To die yourself and not the beast. Almost no one manages it. He did, at the last, by moonlight, holding on to the one good thing he ever found. Sleep on his guiding moonlight. It reached him, in the end, through 100 years of blood. Some lights do. And the woman at the heart of it all, the one Gehrman loved and lost and rebuilt as the doll, the one who was there on the beach when the worst thing happened. Her name is Lady Maria, and she waits, in the second story, at the top of a tall clock tower in the nightmare in a rich chair, and there is blood pooling from her own wrists, because Maria could not live with what she had done, and could not quite die of it either. She was at the Fishing Hamlet. She helped commit the crime that curses all the hunters. And afterward, unlike almost everyone, she could not pretend it away. She threw her own weapon down a well. Her beloved blade, the rakuyo, the thing she was most herself with, she could not stand the sight of anymore because of what she had used it for on that beach, and she dropped it into the dark rather than keep looking at it. And she took up a post at the top of the clock tower, guarding the hidden door down to the drowned village, guarding the way to the very crime she committed, keeping the world from reaching the horror she helped make forever. She is not guarding it from you, exactly. She is guarding it because guilt needs somewhere to stand, and the top of a lonely tower above the drowned village is where hers chose to stand. When you fight her and she falls, she says a small, tired, true thing about the whole endless horror of the nightmare. A corpse should be left well alone, she says. She knows. She, of anyone, knows what comes of disturbing the dead, of cracking open a god on a beach to see what is inside her. She spent the rest of her existence at the top of a tower trying to keep anyone else from doing it. Rest on Lady Maria, in her chair, in the clock tower, above the village, blood at her wrists, guarding the door to her own worst deed. Gehrman loved her so much he built a doll of her to keep. She loved the world enough, or hated her own crime enough, to stand guard over it until the end of time. They are the same story, those two, the doll in the dream and the woman in the tower. Grief pointed two different directions, and neither of them ever got to rest. Let them tonight. Let them both finally rest. There is a place in the second story, hidden inside the healing church, that is quieter than its horror should allow, and it is called the Research Hall, and it is where the church tried, gently, patiently, cruelly, to make people into kin. Floor after floor of patients, the church's own volunteers and victims, their minds flooded with strange waters over years, in the hope that some of them would open their eyes on the inside and perceive the cosmos directly and become the bridge to the gods the whole church had always wanted. And the terrible tender thing about the research hall is that the patients are not monsters. Most of them. They are gentle. They wander the halls, blind, their heads swollen and strange from what was done to them, and they do not attack. They plead, softly, for small things, for comfort, for a familiar voice, and there is one in particular, a patient named Eileen, who makes a kind of blood of her own, and offers it to you, and asks, mostly, only to be remembered, to be spoken to matter to someone. They were people who gave themselves to the church's dream of transcendence, and the church took them up on it and turned them into this, and left them wandering in the dark, gentle, and ruined, and forgotten. It is the choir's orphanage grown old, the same project, the same belief that suffering now buys sight later, carried out on adults who said yes. And it did not work, or it worked just enough to be worse than not working. Rest in the research hall, among the gentle patients, in the quiet. They are not going to hurt you. They only want what the doll wants, what the gods want, what everyone in this whole story wants, underneath everything, which is to be held and remembered and told that they mattered. Almost no one in Yharnam gets that. The patients in the hall ask for it, softly, in the dark, all night, of anyone who passes. You could stop. You could listen. That is a kindness the city allows you if you take it. Take it tonight. Listen to them a while before you sleep. And the end of the second story, and of the whole long history of the crime, is a child on a beach. Past Lady Maria, down through the hidden door, into the drowned fishing hamlet, across the barnacled market and the flooded huts, and out onto the sand, to the body of the dead god, Kos, still lying where she washed up all those years ago. And from her corpse, at last, the child emerges. The orphan of Kos. The baby that died on this beach with its mother before it ever lived, the reason for the entire curse, born now, or born again, out of the dead mother, into a hunt with no mourning. And it grieves. Before it fights, before it becomes the hardest and most desperate thing in the whole game, it stands on the sand and looks up at the sky, mournfully, this newborn thing, and it holds up a length of its mother's own umbilical cord, like a weapon and like a keepsake both, and it screams, a newborn scream, on a dead beach, and it begs. Mercy, it says, in the game's own words, before the violence. Mercy for the poor, wizened child. Mercy, oh please. It asks for the one thing no one on this beach ever gave, and no one gives it now, because you cannot, because the only mercy left for the orphan of Kos is the one you have come to give, which is an ending. And when you kill it, when you return the child to the ocean at last, the curse lifts. The hunters go free. The nightmare ends. Why this specific mercy, this ending, grants that release, the story never explains. It only says that it is the one thing that grants the poor child peace. Rest on the orphan, on the beach, in the last of it. The whole story, the whole city, the whole 100 years of blood and hunting and grieving gods comes down to a baby on the sand, asking for mercy and getting, instead, at long last, an end which turns out, in this story, to be the same thing as mercy after all. Sleep on the beach. The tide comes in. The god is at rest. The child is at rest. The hunters are free. It cost everything and everyone, and it is finally over. One last return to the clearing before the end, because there is a detail there I have been saving. The hunter's dream, the safe, quiet, dusk-lit place you rest between every horror, has a row of gravestones in it. You may have walked past them all night. And the doll says, if you ask, that they mark the hunters who came before. Countless hunters. All the ones who came to this dream on some night of some hunt and rested among these flowers and went out and did not come back and became a stone in the grass. Which tells you something about the night you have been living through. Most people believe it is not the first time, that the hunt loops, that the dream repeats, that many hunters before you woke in that clinic and read that note and walked these same streets and fought these same beasts and came, at the end, to the foot of the same tree and made the same choice over and over, and that you are one of a long line of them, and the graves in the clearing are your predecessors, and one day, in some ending, one of those graves is yours. The story does not confirm this. It only leaves the graves there, in the flowers, more of them than one night could account for, and lets you count them and wonder. It is a strange comfort and a strange dread, the loop. Dread, because it means the horror never really ends, that the city bleeds forever, that the hunt goes round and round under the red moon with a new small hunter each time. And comfort, because it means you are not alone, that others came before and rested in this same quiet clearing and were held by this same gentle doll and were, for a night, safe among the flowers, exactly as you have been all night tonight. Rest among the graves. They are not a warning. They are company. Countless hunters, before you, rested here, just like this, in the dusk, among the flowers, held by something gentle. You are the newest of a very long line of the tired and the doomed and the briefly, truly safe. Sleep in good company. You have never been the only one. And down, at the last, all the way down, under everything, to where it started, the buried labyrinth of the Pythagoreans, the Chalice Dungeons, chamber below chamber, older than the city, older than the church, older than the crime on the beach. This is where Byrgenwerth's prospectors went, generation after generation, into the dark, and it is where the old blood came from, and it is where, most of all, the last truth of the story waits, quiet and enormous and almost never seen. Because the Pthumerians knew the Great Ones. Long before Byrgenwerth lit a candle, long before Laurence poured his first cup, this vanished people lived alongside the gods, worshipped them, bred with them, and fell, and their whole civilization is down there still, in the dark, tomb after tomb, waiting for anyone patient enough or mad enough to go all the way down. And at the very bottom, in the deepest chamber, sits their queen, the one the city was named for, Yharnam, the Pthumerian queen, bound and pregnant and silent, guarding the last secret of her dead nation, which is, most believe, that all of this has happened before. That the reaching, the blood, the gods, the children, the fall, is not new. That the Pthumerians did it first and became the labyrinth, and that Yharnam above is only the latest city to be built over the bones of the last one that tried. That is the deepest rest in the whole story and the strangest comfort. It has all happened before. It will all happen again. The city reaches for the gods, and the reaching makes monsters, and the city falls, and a new city is built over it, and reaches, in turn. The graves in the dream, the queen in the deep, the loop at the foot of the tree, all of it says the same quiet thing. You are not the first. You will not be the last. And there is peace in that, if you let there be, the peace of a very old pattern, turning, under the moon, forever, with you, a small part of it, for one night, resting now, at the very bottom, where the first of them all lies bound in the dark, keeping the oldest secret, which is only that none of this was ever new. Sleep at the bottom of the world. The Queen keeps watch. She has kept watch a very long time. She does not mind keeping it a little longer, while you rest. That is the story of the city that could not stop bleeding, or as much of it as one night can hold. Some of you have been asleep since the first street, and some of you are still here, and both are right, and both were the plan. If you drifted off, the city is exactly where you left it, in the fog, under the moon, and it will be there tomorrow, and the story will pick up wherever you like, because every street and every scrap of it is its own beginning. And if you are still awake, I hope you have something to hold. The old teacher, afraid of the right thing. The doll, unsure her love was real, loving anyway. The hunter, drowning in blood, surfacing for one clear moment of moonlight. The orphan on the sand, asking for mercy. The grieving gods, facing away, harmless until we came too close. Take one, whichever is nearest. Let the rest go dark, one lamp at a time, the way the lamps go out, along the streets of Yharnam, as the fog comes in, until there is only the clearing, and the flowers, and the dusk that never quite becomes night, and something gentle keeping watch. That is your cue. The hunt is over. Nothing else is asked of you tonight. Sleep well.